The Royals are reported to be interested in Dodgers left fielder Teoscar Hernández. Do we feel like it's the right move? We'll tell you next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals in the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. That is at JOHNYJ_15. And you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast, Odyssey, and YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. For the first-time listeners wondering what to expect from this channel, well, beginning next week, we will be dropping down from 5 episodes a week to 3 episodes. Will be a little bit of an off-season period for us, but we'll be ramped back up to 5 episodes a week right around the middle portion of February, maybe even early on February. But for about a month to a month and a half, we will be dropping down to 3 episodes a week, unless there would be some massive breaking news where even if we had our 3-episode limit, we would try to add in 1 more episode or 2 episodes that week. So there will be a little bit of a shaking up beginning next week, but usually 10 months out of the year, 10 to 10 and a half months, you're getting 5 episodes a week, 30-minute episodes in length. Before we dive into our first segment today, I want to tell you that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. It's yet another episode, yet another day that we are going to be talking about a potential target for the Kansas City Royals. But whereas for the first couple weeks of the offseason, this was all predicted trade talk or predicted free agent talk, we have some reports to go off of. And I'm not really sure, I'm not 100% confident if we ever brought up Teoscar Hernández as an option prior to this episode, but now we do have the reports coming out of the Dodgers media that Kansas City is a team that is interested in the powerful right-handed left fielder of the LA Dodgers. First and foremost, does this line up with what the Royals need? And the second part of this, can they even afford a guy like Hernández? Now, a little bit of the background info, if you're not as familiar with him, you're talking about a 33-year-old outfielder that's still under contract for another 2 years. He signed a 3-year deal, I believe $66 million last offseason, as he was a very coveted free agent in that winter period of the offseason. But now he's a guy that maybe the Dodgers are going to be looking to move if they're making a push for Kyle Tucker or if they're making a push for a reunion with Cody Bellinger. This is where the Royals can step in, needing a right-handed corner outfielder, somebody who has a ton of power and didn't take advantage of a very hitter-friendly ballpark. He's not like he's coming over from Cincinnati or Houston or Yankee Stadium, where some of those numbers might be inflated. For the entirety of Hernandez's career, he has been a big-time power bat, a all-star, silver slugger. The defense has always lagged behind, but when you're acquiring a guy like him, you are focused on the bat. You are focused on that bat being in the middle of the order. He has been a postseason hero for the Dodgers. He was great with the Mariners. He began his career with the Astros, was involved in a very big trade back then. But now at this point in his career, he's coming off of a quote-unquote down season, so I can understand why the pushback was immediate from the Royals fan base. You know, he got on base at a 284 clip. He doesn't walk a lot. He swings and misses a lot, but he did have 25 bombs and 89 driven in for a Dodgers team that won back-to-back championships. There is maybe some holes you can poke with those numbers, right? He's in a lineup that has multiple MVP winners, multiple MVP candidates. He's able to blend a little bit into the background. But still, 25 bombs and nearly 90 RBIs from a corner outfield spot would be a big win for the Royals. And I was asked this question earlier this morning of what would it take to get him? Because I know that's going to be a lot of people's question. Yeah, that sounds great on the surface. Even in a down year, he was an above average bat. Those power numbers would be excellent for the Royals outfield. And if you add that to maybe a bounce back year from Caglione, now you're getting immense power from both the corner outfield spots. And even if it's subpar defense, you know the offense is going to do wonders if those two guys could really get going in the middle of the order. The cost part of it really comes down to the contract, in my opinion. When you look at a guy like Hernández, 33 years old, still under contract another 2 years, I believe toward the payroll, he's making like 14 to 15 million. That's easily doable for the Royals. I know in an annual salary, it's 22 to 23 million. There was the luxury tax I was looking at too on Spotrac earlier this morning. But I feel that when you compare him to a Brendan Donovan or a Jarren Duran or even a Harrison Bader, and I put a poll out there on Twitter if you guys want to go and vote there. We've got about 1,000 votes or so far, and it's kind of even between Duran, Donovan, and Hernández. Bader's really the only one that's falling behind, and I know a lot of people aren't big fans of the Royals going after Harrison Bader. But Hernández, to me, feels like the most gettable. You look at a guy like Jarren Duran. It's been very clear, and you heard our crossover episode yesterday with Gabby of Locked On Red Sox. They would really like Cole Ragans, and I'm not sure they would settle for Noah Cameron. And we'll dive into this in the third segment today, but the Royals have pretty much taken Cole Ragans out of these trade discussions. They are not really entertaining any offers. If they are going to move somebody, you're looking at the four guys in the rotation like Noah Cameron, Chris Bubic, Bergert, and Stephen Kolek. With Hernández, if you are willing to eat maybe half that contract or maybe 70 to 75% of that contract, you might not have to give up Noah Cameron. You might not have to give up Ryan Bergert. It seems that the Royals would be motivated to move Chris Bubic the most because he's got the injury concerns. He's going to be a free agent at season's end. That feels like a good landing spot for the Dodgers, who did run into some starting pitching issues last year. We know they're going to be able to get whoever they want. They just got Edwin Diaz. They're still in play for Kyle Tucker. There were rumblings out of the winter meetings in Orlando that Tarek Skubal could be a guy they go out there and move heaven and earth to get. To me, I still feel that being unlikely that they would land Tarek Skubal, but they want to go and really make that rotation unbeatable. They were unbeatable in the postseason. We saw how good they got with Ohtani and Yamamoto and Snell. But Bubic feels like a great swing man for them, where if they put their sights on Tucker or they put their sights on Bellinger and they go big on a corner outfielder, that does take Teoscar Hernández out of their everyday lineup. And for the Royals, if you're willing to eat the money and you don't want to have to send over Noah Cameron, would you do it if you sent Chris Bubic over to LA, brought back Teoscar Hernández, didn't have to take on the whole salary, but the more you take on, the less you have to give up? Or would you rather go the opposite approach of, we will give you more than maybe we should, but you're eating the majority of that contract. So we're getting Teoscar Hernández coming off of a down year where we're not paying a large portion of that annual salary. I see both sides to this. I will say this, though, about a lot of people out there that have pushed back on numerous outfield targets. Because as I've said before, and I stand by it, there is not going to be a guy they acquire that everybody says that is a phenomenal deal. Unless they were to trade like some middle prospect for a guy like Teoscar Hernández and the Dodgers ate all the money, which isn't going to be a situation. Or the same thing happens with Donovan or Duran. The reality is it's not going to happen. These are going to be expensive bats that you're bringing in, but they're all upgrades over what the Royals have had. So even if you want to be a little bit picky about who they're acquiring, they are all significant upgrades over what the Royals have had in left field or in right field, right? If you go after Jarren Duran, even in a down year for Duran, he's going to be a league average or slightly above average bat for the Royals. Ceiling, you're talking about a top 10 player in all of baseball. Brendan Donovan, he feels like the safest pick on what he'd bring you, and maybe not as expensive as Jarren Duran, but, you can maybe not see as high a value in more of a utility guy than someone you can play in left field every single day. Donovan can play left field every single day, but he's a Gold Glove second baseman. So I could see that argumentative point. And the Cardinals have 20 suitors right now for Brendan Donovan. They are our team that can sit back and just have an offer a week or an offer every day if they really wanted to, and they can evaluate multiple different outlets. The Royals would have to be the team to go above and beyond, stand out amongst the rest to get a guy like Brendan Donovan, and they really want Noah Cameron. So Would you want to give up Noah Cameron for Brendan Donovan? Maybe some of you would, but the Royals don't want to do a one-for-one deal. They would rather, if they're going to move Noah Cameron, know they're getting a big-time player and then some. When you get to Teoscar Hernández, I don't feel the Dodgers would be against acquiring Chris Bubich and eating some of the money to move Hernández. I mean, you talk about the rich getting richer. They feel they're at a point where Teoscar Hernández could be expendable. But don't get it twisted. In 2024, he was a Silver Slugger. He had a 30 home run season. He was an all-star. I mean, he was phenomenal for the Dodgers. I mean, a really prolific bat. And it's one thing to be 1 year removed from that, and it's one thing to be 3 or 4 years removed. You know, we try to talk ourselves into bounce back years for a guy that's, 3 to 4 years removed from a great season. It's different when you had one off year. But even in a down year, you add that bat. I mean, you just take out the name, you take out the contract. You add that bat to the middle of the order for the Royals, and you don't have to give up Reagans or Cameron or Bergert or Kolek. Is that something you're willing to do? And one more thing to point out before we move on to our second segment. In this Dodgers article from the LA Times, the Royals were the only team that were mentioned. And now that can just be coincidental. I'm sure there could be other teams that have called, but to name drop the Royals, not once, but twice in their interest of him, I feel that does hold some weight. Again, as I always try to end these segments with, he's not a perfect fit. Age and defense would be concern. The contract would be a little bit of a concern. But of the guys we've talked about, and he does fit the profile for right-handed outfielder who has big-time power and middle-of-the-order impact, he feels like the most gettable of all the guys that we've talked about. Would you like to see the Royals land Teoscar Hernández? If so, let us know your trade proposal in the YouTube comments below. When we come back, a former Royal and target is now off the board. And to be honest, I thought it was a little bit pricey, and I'm glad the Royals didn't go down that route. I'll tell you why next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15. Want to tell you about our one of two sponsors in today's episode, and that would be Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off on your first purchase. Those terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, and go download Gametime today. We got the word last night that Mike Yastrzemski is now off the board in free agency. It actually was very interesting. I'm going to go back and name drop the guy who first had brought this up. I know the national reporters like Robert Murray, Jeff Passan, Bob Nightingale, John Heyman, they had all reported it, but I don't believe I saw them give this guy credit. Sam Fosberg on Twitter at Discuss Baseball, he had tweeted yesterday afternoon, hearing from a very reliable source that Mike Yastrzemski is working on a multi-year deal north of $10 million. I cannot disclose the exact club, but the deal is pending a physical. A couple hours later, it turns out that team is the Atlanta Braves, and I wanted to give credit to that guy because he's the one who had the scoop. He's the one I heard about it the first, and I'm not sure if I saw him get the credit that he deserved. But I thought for a moment that might be the Royals, and Sam actually went on to report it came down between the Braves and the Royals. So there were reports that the Marlins might be interested because Gabe Kapler, his former manager, now in the front office with the Marlins. They got that tie. Maybe he would go back to play for Buster Posey in San Francisco. So you had the ties there, but the only two teams that were really in the thick of it and trying to acquire a guy like Mike Yastrzemski were the Atlanta Braves and the Kansas City Royals. When I saw this report first pop up, I thought, well, that makes a lot of sense if it's a 2-year deal worth $12 million, right? You get a multi-year deal. He probably doesn't want to keep playing on 1-year contracts. It's potentially the last chance he has to get a multi-year deal. And if you're the Royals, you would be all right giving him an extra year if it was only $6 million or $7 million. You're not going to be that moved financially if that was the route you chose. What I believe it came down to, and why I'm glad the Royals backed off, is that the Braves are giving him an everyday spot. The Braves, as it was reported this morning, view him as a left fielder. And for the Royals, we know they are hunting for that everyday left fielder. But they used Mike Yastrzemski as a platoon bat to close out the 2025 season. And it wasn't just out of randomness. Mike Yastrzemski could not hit left-handed pitching. He was hitting, I believe, well below 180 against left-handed pitching. And even if he started the game, there were times where the Royals got to the fifth inning in a big spot and they pinch hit for him. So to see a 2-year deal, $23 million in total, you're talking $11.5 million a year. It was good the Royals stayed away from that because there's multiple things they have to cover up and figure out through free agency. And if you spend 11.5 toward a guy you're not even expecting to play every day, then it's a good move to back off of that. It's all right if Atlanta's the team to jump out ahead of you. And they made a couple of big moves. They got Yaz last night. They got Robert Suarez on a 3-year deal earlier this afternoon. For the Royals, if he's going to be off the table, though, and now you can pivot to somebody else, then I would like to see them before maybe the end of next week land at least one free agent. It can be a bench guy. It does not need to be an everyday player, but it would be nice to get on the board just so you can check one box off. J.J. Picollo with Annie Rogers in an article posted, I believe, last night or early this morning, had said that they left winter meetings feeling good about the conversations they've had, and they feel they made some progress with free agents, with some trades. Nothing is imminent. They feel that it's going to take some time with the trade rep. But free agency, you never know. Some of these guys have the offers, and they could accept them tonight. They could accept them in a couple of weeks, maybe next month. You never really know with those sort of things until they actually happen. Of course, unless you're way more plugged in than I am, which a ton of people are, and they could see some of the reports coming out earlier, and then, maybe a deal could move rather quickly. But I would say when it comes to Yastrzemski, there was no perfect spot for him. If you wanted him in right field, well, Jack Caglione's there. You're not platooning Cags and Yaz because they're both left-handed bats. Center field made a little bit of sense, and I thought if the Royals were that team to emerge, giving him the 2-year deal north of $20 million, then center field makes the most sense because I never saw him as their everyday left field guy. He can't be with the numbers that he's posted against lefties. And maybe the Braves are all right with the left-handed numbers, maybe with a strong side platoon. I mean, they do have an elite outfield. I know Michael Harris had a down year, but you got Acuna, Harris in a bounce back year would be great. They could live with Mike Yastrzemski not being as great against lefties. Where the Royals, they just can't afford that, right? We know that whoever they go out there and get is their everyday bat. They need to be a huge difference maker. And Yastrzemski felt like a boost to their team, but a boost off the bench. You couldn't put him in center field because the defense was just not going to be as good. And one thing I haven't even touched on yet, he's 35 years old. Are you wanting to give a guy that's 35 and he turned 35 a couple of months ago, you're wanting to give him a 2-year deal? I know it comes across like I'm just talking down the deal and talking down the player because the Royals didn't get him. I promise I'm not trying to go that route. But I can see the reasons as to why it just didn't work out in the Royals' favor in the end. Now, if he signed with Atlanta for a 1-year deal worth $5 million, then I would question why the Royals didn't just give him the $5 million, and now you've got a pretty good bat off the bench and somebody you could get into the lineup 65 to 70% of the time. But if you have your sights set on something bigger, which J.J. Picollo had said, they left the winter meetings feeling like everybody they really want to go after is still out there, then I expect you to capitalize on it. Because the one thing I want to say here before we end our second segment, you can be interested in a lot of guys out there. You can be interested in every outfielder. And when your name pops up, some people are going to give you the pat on the back and say, well, I'm just glad they're putting themselves out there. They're throwing their weight around a little bit. But for a lot of you, and I even feel this way too, I mean, as a podcaster, when it's December 10th and 11th, it certainly doesn't hurt when you get these reports and we can talk about them in the middle of the off season. Now, I know there will be times in January where there's nothing being talked about and it's the dead period. It's the dead of winter. That will be a little bit harder to come up with some segments. So I can appreciate it, but I also can grow restless of, well, I'm tired of seeing you be linked to all these players. How about you go out there and make a move? And it's not that you need to be jumping at the first offer, which it's very clear the Royals have not jumped at the first offer. But you don't want to get into mid-January without a big move. I would like to see the Royals land their everyday left fielder before the new year. That's the clock that I'm putting on them and JJ Picollo. Yes, it's a possibility it bleeds into January. Am I going to throw a tantrum on January 1st if no move has been made? I won't. But if you get through the offseason and that trade ends up not being as big as it's been talked up to be, then we do have reason to be a little bit frustrated as we go into spring training. But the options are out there. We know they're interested in a bunch of players, but we have grown a little bit restless that nothing has happened yet, even on a left-handed bullpen arm, a platoon bat, just another move that we can talk about. So I don't blame anybody getting tired of me hearing me say the Royals are interested in player X. But we saw last night Mike Yastrzemski go to Atlanta. We can now put that possibility to rest, and you got to turn to the next guy they may or may not be interested in right now. Do you believe that Mike Yastrzemski is going to have a good year in Atlanta? And more importantly, are you disappointed the Royals didn't give him that deal? Let us know in the YouTube comments below. When we come back, I do want to circle back to that article from Andy Rogers and the possibility of the Royals doing a 3-team trade. That's coming up next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can listen to us on wherever you download your podcast. Want to tell you about two things, beginning with the Everydayer Club. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in the world. You already live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Royals with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. And we will be posting the URL in our show notes on YouTube, and it will also be on the apps like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you are interested, just scroll down a little bit. The URL will be right there, and you can get signed up for all that access and ad-free Locked On Royals moving forward. Also want to tell you about the title sponsor in FanDuel. NFL Sundays move fast, one big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so very exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place live bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, then visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. And for my pick, I will go to one of the biggest games on Sunday. It'll be the Lions and the Rams. It's time to stop going against the Rams, in my opinion. They aren't just a dark horse to win the NFC. They might just be the favorite to get back to the Super Bowl and get Matt Stafford his second ring and maybe even an MVP award in the NFL. So he has been somebody that has been so dominant. Sean McVay and that Rams team, they're scary and scarier than the Lions. I'll go with the Rams outright to win that colossal matchup on Sunday. So circling back to that article that Andy Rogers posted, leaving the winter meetings, knowing the Royals still need that impact bat, I found it interesting that JJ Picollo had referenced maybe getting involved in a 3-team trade. And if they are involved in a 3-team trade, then it's going to take some time. And that should be a foregone conclusion. If you're working with 2 other teams and you're trying to iron out the details and which guy may go where, it's going to take more than just a day or two to get something figured out. But this does open up a different possibility for the Royals, right? We're looking at the Red Sox and we're looking at Jarren Duran. We're looking at the Cardinals and Brendan Donovan. We're looking at Teoscar Hernández and the Dodgers. If you're not willing to go and give Boston Cole Reagans, or you're not willing to give the Cardinals Noah Cameron for Brendan Donovan, you bring in another team that maybe does have a pitcher that could match Cole Reagans or is better than Noah Cameron, has the years of control those teams are looking for, and you can be the one to give a different player, maybe a top prospect, to a rebuilding team and to get this deal all worked out. One that immediately came to mind, and I don't feel that Joe Ryan would be moved from Minnesota. The Twins have been pretty open about not moving Joe Ryan. But I thought about this where if it's Boston, right? I'm just purely speaking in hypotheticals here. This has not been rumored to be happening. This has not been reported. But if Boston really wants the starter and the Royals don't want to give up Cole Reagans, they don't want to give up Noah Cameron. Well, Minnesota might not care that Boston's in pretty big contention for the AL East and is going to be hunting for a playoff spot because the Twins are entering more of a rebuild year. At least I feel they're going to be moving in that direction. They don't want to move Joe Ryan, but what if they were to move Pablo Lopez? So the Red Sox could get Pablo Lopez, and then instead of the Red Sox sending Jarren Duran to Minnesota, what if they sent Jarren Duran to Kansas City? And then Kansas City sends multiple top prospects to Minnesota, who's entering more of a rebuild year, right? Because that satisfies everybody. The Royals get their outfielder. They don't have to give up pitching. The Red Sox, they are looking to move Jarren Duran, but they get a pitcher that, comes from a team that's more willing to move a top-level pitcher. Like, to me, that's where every team can walk away pretty happy for the most part. Where the issue might happen is the Twins are saying, well, the Royals don't have a great farm system. So we don't want to get a 25th ranked farm system's number one prospect when we could go to another team and trade Pablo Lopez for better prospects, guys that can maybe help us this season in our rebuild year, pair him with a Luke Keyshaw, right? Some of the younger players on that Twins roster. But it's just something that popped in my mind where it doesn't have to be you giving the pitching to Boston. It doesn't have to be you giving the pitching to St. Louis. You could ring in another team that has pitching and is looking to rebuild. And, maybe if you wanted to have Boston send Peyton Tolley to Minnesota as well, so they get more of their fix in with younger pitching, the Royals send a Blake Mitchell to Minnesota or a Blake Mitchell and someone else. So Minnesota could get 3 players in this, and then the Royals and Red Sox only get 1. That's what I love about 3-team trades is you don't have to be the one to give the team that you are actively talking with the pitching or the bat that they need. Well, the Royals don't want to send Reagans or Cameron to Boston because you're actively competing against them. If you send Blake Mitchell to Minnesota, yeah, he might terrorize you in a few years, but the goal is set on 2026 right now and making it to the postseason. If you feel Duran is that route for you or Donovan's that route for you, bring in that third team. Maybe they have the top-level arm. If St. Louis is looking for young, controllable pitching, where could that be? Somewhere in the National League or somewhere in the American League. But here is what J.J. Picollo had to say, on that 3-team trade, which I would love to see it because 3-team trades are awesome no matter who's involved with it. But he said, quote, "It may not be one team involved. It may be multiple teams involved. It's hard enough to think for yourself, let alone other teams and how they value players. You're not just going to get one team to see equal value. You're trying to get 3 teams to agree on equal value, and that can be challenging. But there are some good ideas. There are some things worth pursuing and continuing discussions on." I don't feel you bring up the idea of a 3-team trade unless you've had conversations about one. And though I don't know for certain, I would put over 50% confidence in the fact they've at least mulled around with that opportunity. That they have had some form of discussions with 2 other teams about what a deal may look like. And if that takes multiple weeks, if that takes a month and a half, so be it, as long as you get the guy that you are really gunning for. But that's one area I hadn't really tossed around in any of these episodes of why not bring in somebody else to give Boston the pitcher they want, but Boston then sends you the outfielder you need as long as you are sending that third team the prospects they need. I mean, that feels like the best case scenario for the Royals because you get to keep the pitching that you have, but you are sending young, good prospects to another team. And I know Minnesota's one team I've brought up. I'm not saying they make the most sense, but they are the first team I went to. Because you look at Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan, they were discussed as trade chips. Maybe they shut down those talks on Joe Ryan, maybe not for Pablo Lopez. And Pablo Lopez could be a legitimate number 2, number 3 for the Boston Red Sox and continuing to build that elite level rotation. But if J.J. Picollo is open to it, I'm sure a lot of the fan base would be open to it as well, because that feels like an absolute win-win for the Royals if they could get a bat like Duran, a bat like Donovan, and all they would be sending in a deal like that is prospects to a team that's not contending right now. That is the perfect case scenario. I'm not sure that's how it would all work out, because I still don't see a way in which the Royals don't give up one of those starters that they have, but we'll see. If it's a 3-team trade, then I'm all for it. Do you believe that's a possibility for the Royals? And as I said in the first segment, let us know your hypothetical trades for a 3-team trade, and let us know your mailbag question for tomorrow's episode. But that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Royals today. And as I said, Mailbag Friday is tomorrow. Make sure you subscribe and follow this podcast so you get all the latest episodes. And then Locked On, make your Spotify Wrapped. Prove it on social media to secure a free month of our brand new Everydayer Club. Just tag our national Locked On Podcast Network account on any social platform, and we'll drop you a code. Be one of the first to join the Everydayer Club to get your favorite show ad-free and exclusive access to the members-only Discord channel. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. And on audio, make sure you make your second listen Locked On MLB. Until tomorrow for our Mailbag Friday, you take it easy, Kansas City.